I want to believe that Freddie Freeman has been practicing this for 2 years since the team started making fun of his dancing. Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world who doesn't think it's a real parade unless there's an inflatable Snoopy and people twirling batons. I'm Jake Mintz. That's Jordan Shusterman. Could you imagine if, like, at the Dodgers parade, there was like an inflatable, Max Muncy trailing the buses?
Or for efficiency's sake, let's just include the Dodgers in the Thanksgiving Day parade. I mean, it's coming up in a few weeks. We should at least send some representatives, whether it's Miguel Rojas or like Jack Dreyer goes and like does a little dance. Like I think that feels, again,
Jack
with
Dreyer
the timing,
with the
Rockettes.
Feels...
I feel like there's an opportunity here to combine the World Series and Thanksgiving Day parades. On this episode of Baseball Barbacast, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Los Angeles Dodgers, who won the World Series again. They had their parade shockingly quickly after winning in Toronto 48 hours earlier. They've been making the rounds on the late night shows and whatnot. But now that we are recording at a more normal time, we are going to take some time on this episode on Wednesday to kind of have a little bit more coherent conversation about the Los Angeles Dodgers, and that is going to be our opener.
The champagne was hardly dry by the time the Los Angeles Dodgers climbed onto a series of double-decker tour buses and paraded their way through downtown Los Angeles to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of adoring Angelinos dressed head to toe in Dodger blue. I think the timing of the parade had to do with, I don't think they thought they were going to need 7 games, right? Like if the Dodgers win in 5, the parade would have been appropriately scheduled, but it did feel like a particular turnaround as far as things that happened at the parade. In my mind, parade content needs to reach a certain bar of interesting. And that bar, for me, is 2021 Fast Bus in Atlanta. For those of you who have never seen Fast Bus, Google Braves Fast Bus. It is the Braves parade bus going far too fast. And if I see anything that is funnier or as funny as that, it sticks in my head. And I'm not sure there was anything this year. Last year, Dave Roberts, for lack of a better term, spreading cheeks while dancing at the parade certainly qualified. There was nothing that quite stuck for me this year in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, the very simple way to think about it is just like, who is as wasted as can be? Who is going to embarrass themselves publicly or endear themselves to the general public in how they choose to act?
Who is acting wasted? Who is acting wasted that does not drink? Right. So, for instance, Blake Snell, bone dry sober, not a consumer of any inebriators whatsoever, and yet his visage perpetually exudes the appearance of someone who is both drunk and high. And so it is funny to watch him at a parade knowing that he's sober, acting like a goofball.
Yeah, and I do think that with this particular parade with the Dodgers, and I mean, you can apply this to kind of the conversation we're going to have shortly about just how we're kind of taking in this Dodgers team and thinking about the roster and what this championship means for each player. But it's hard not to just be like, okay, well, which of these guys did we see do this last year? I've already seen Anthony Banda with his shirt off, showing off all his tattoos. And that's still a great moment, Yeah, still happy for Anthony Banda, but there are a lot of players on this team that are like, oh my God, I'm doing this for the first time. Whether it's Justin Dean, getting fans going nuts for Justin Dean, of course for Roki is another one, right? the guys, because then you have the whole group of people who a year ago when they were doing this, they're like, we're going back to back. And at the time we're all like, okay, sure you are, right? Like that's as awesome as the Dodgers are. That sounds pretty difficult. But now they're even more empowered to be going full blown like three-peat.
Just throwing out wild numbers.
Yeah, they feel invincible, whether it's Kike, whether it's Muncy, whether it's Mookie saying he's trying to fill up his whole hand with World Series rings now that he has 4, whether it's Ohtani just being like, yeah, can't wait to do this again next year. Like, for those players, especially for the ones that showed up last year for the first time, think about those guys, right? Whether it's Teoscar, whether it's Ohtani, Yamamoto, it's like this is all they know. It's like, of course the season ends with the Dodgers World Series parade. Ohtani has yet to lose a postseason series, so this is I know he wasn't in the postseason for a long time, but this is just what they've come to expect, and you can understand why they are acting that way. But I do think that the discrepancy between the Blake Snells, the guys that are new to the team, enjoying it, versus the ones who were clearly like, oh yeah, this is of course we're doing this again. It's kind of fun to watch.
We also have the players that were on last year's team that did not contribute in the same way, and that is Glass now, right? Who was not on the playoff roster because he was hurt in 24, being a huge part of them winning in 25. He's just like in it more. Same thing even with Kershaw, right? Like Kershaw wasn't on the playoff roster last year. Like, okay, here's an example. I was looking at the dudes that went on Kimmel, a show that I have, as you know, appeared on. We could talk about that later, I guess.
I mean, hold on. Can you actually just quickly mention that, because we're not going to circle back to it, and it is very funny.
Okay, so a couple days ago, I think it was like around game 5, I got a text from my uncle who's like, you were on Kimmel. And when you get a text from someone saying that you were on Kimmel, your first response is, no, I wasn't, because I wasn't. I didn't go to Jimmy Kimmel. Anyway, they did a bit on Kimmel about the Dodgers game from the 18-inning game 3 game. And in the bit, it's basically like, everyone was so tired that even Ohtani's interpreter needed a day off. And they video shop Guillermo, who is Kimmel's sidekick, next to Ohtani as his interpreter. And they used the question from the press conference, the first question, which was asked by your second favorite member of the Cespedes Family Barbecue. And the question was, Shohei, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? And how do you feel right now? Good question, I have to say.
Yeah,
they made fun of me.
I agree.
With Guillermo yelling at Ohtani, he wants to know how you're feeling. And then Guillermo responding to me, he's tired, dumbass. But anyway, that was weird.
You can go watch that clip. I'm sure you can find that clip somewhere on YouTube, and you will hear Jake's voice on Kimmel, which I guess they didn't. Did you get like a production credit or anything?
No credit. No credit. No credit.
But you wanted to. The point is, as we bring it back to what you were actually mentioning,
to Kimmel.
Glass now on Kimmel. You're locked in.
Glass now on Kimmel. Glass. Yeah, I'm watching every night now. Like, it is. He's not on Kimmel last year. He's that would actually be interesting. What was the Dodger group that did the circuit last year versus this year? Like, this year it's been Will Smith, right? This year it's been more Kike, it feels like.
Yep. Snell was on there.
Yeah.
We saw some Dave Roberts for sure.
Yes. So the quintet was Will Smith, Kike, Blake Snell, Glasnow, Dave Roberts. Going to do that with your manager is very funny to me. And I guess last year it was just all Freddie, really.
Yeah, it was a lot of Freddie, for sure. Understandably. Which, again, not like Freddie doesn't deserve to be in the mix again, but it seems like he's like, I kind of did. I mean, last year, Freddie was like, he was the whole thing in a lot of respects. And understandably, because of the walk-off, because he homered in every game or almost every game. Like, it was absolutely all about him. And this time, understandably, in a 7-game series and how this season went, it was a lot of people.
With all due respect to Will Smith, who's a great baseball player, is he the least charismatic guest in the history of Kimmel?
Yeah, well, again, he wasn't. If he was by himself, I think that would have been a bit of a tough ask. But They made it work. And yes, to your point, obviously they're kind of expanding it. You mentioned Glass, you mentioned Kershaw. I mean, even Miguel Rojas, right? I mean, that's a guy who was on the team last year. I think he got 2, maybe 4 at bats in the postseason last year, barely in the World Series. And as we know, he becomes a main character. We can talk a little bit more about Miggy Rowe, but
he
yeah, I mean, all the
get
celebration.
That many more.
Yeah.
He didn't get that many more in the playoffs this year.
That's true. But it's the one that counted, as we know, and certainly on defense, Miguel Rojas made a difference. And then the last thing from the celebration, and then we'll kind of zoom farther out about just like what we're thinking about the Dodgers right now, is the Mookie after party. This is something that I think we saw last year, and it does appear that it has gone down again this year, which is Mookie hosting a party. And this is where we really start to see guys letting loose, including a clip that has people's minds completely blown, understandably, of Freddie Freeman doing the worm. Have you seen this clip yet?
So I have seen this clip, and I have multiple thoughts about it. Okay.
Oh my
so
gosh.
Freddie Freeman doing the worm. The first thought is, didn't he break his rib and ankle? And shouldn't he be more careful? And that was last year, right? Mm-hmm. Last year, he was playing through multiple injuries and he was super banged up. And the idea of Freddie Freeman expending any extra energy after winning the World Series seemed impossible. But he is, all signs, healthy right now. Next point. Freddie Freeman is famous and wealthy because he is supremely coordinated and athletic. And therefore, should not be a surprise that someone who has made hundreds of millions of dollars by moving his body exactly so is able to move his body exactly so.
Yes. This is a good point. However, I do think that remember that like part of the Freddie lore, what is still their celebration at second base is essentially making fun of the way Freddie was dancing at, I think, like some wedding at some point last year or the year before, where he's kind of waving his arms in this awkward manner. And they're like, oh, look at Freddie, look at this dork, he's doing this weird dance that no one else does. And this feels like his grand, like, all right, you want to make fun of me for dancing? Watch this. I got
Watch
more
this.
in the tank here. And that's
I like
what
the
this
idea
really felt
that
like, and I was impressed.
What do I really believe? I believe that Freddie Freeman can move a little bit. I want to believe that Freddie Freeman has been practicing this for 2 years since the team started making fun of his dancing to unleash it at the perfect time, and that he was unable to do so last year due to his injuries. And so he had to wait.
So he's been able to do this. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yes. I think we would have seen this last year had he not been a bag of bones.
I think you're definitely onto something. It is very fun. It's good to know. Now I just honestly, this 6-second clip makes me feel better about Freddie Freeman's like long-term durability and like going into 2026. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? Sure. Is he 36? That's fine. He's going to do exactly what he's done the last 2 years, which is play 147 games and have a 141 OPS plus. He has literally done that exact same thing each of the last 2 seasons, and I expect him to do it again. In fact, I'm even more confident that will happen because he has this kind of flexibility. We had all kinds of great clips of we had Ben Rortvedt, hitting crank that Soldier Boy. Like we had everything.
Think about it this way: Freddie Freeman is, wow, this feels impossible, basically 2 months older than Giancarlo Stanton. Freddie Freeman is 2 months older than Giancarlo.
They are.
Can you imagine?
They have been. Yeah.
But my point is, can you imagine Giancarlo doing this? No. George Springer is 1 week younger than Freddie. No. Anthony Rizzo, retired. Eric Hosmer, retired. I'm just looking at the other people born in 1989, and it's like Freddie Freeman, who's still doing the worm, and a bunch of guys who have hung it up.
Yeah, I would say, as far as, I mean, right. I think Taylor Swift's probably the only 1989 that's like clearly doing better.
Could do this.
Than Freddie Freeman. But I will say, this is very funny you say that about Giancarlo. Also funny you mentioned about Springer. I'll just take this moment to say that, like, we're going to talk a lot more about the Blue Jays later this week. So Blue Jays fans, if you're
they get a whole show,
gritting your teeth through this episode, we're gonna do some more Blue Jays love later on this week. We're gonna keep the focus on the Dodgers. I will say though, you mentioned Springer. There is an alternate reality. Sorry, this is painful for Toronto. There is a very clear alternate reality where Springer is like the version of Freeman, where like the Blue Jays win the World Series and he is doing all of the late night stuff, and he's like, here are all of my injuries, right? John Schneider's been hinting at this all October. He's like, man, just wait till you find out all the stuff that George is playing.
Yeah,
through.
I want to know.
That's essentially what Freddie Freeman had last year, where it was like, oh yeah, you think he's actually even more hurt than you even know. So anyway, that just made me think of that. But
what is the Canadian version of late? Like, is there Canadian late night?
I'm sure it exists, but I can't speak to what it is. That would be interesting.
Email us, baseballbarbacast.
Would the Blue Jays be getting the same invites to Kimmel and such? That would be interesting. Anyway, alternate reality we will maybe ponder in the future if the Blue Jays ever win the World Series. All right, let's keep the focus back to the Dodgers. Jake Mintz, let's keep that focus here. So we saw the celebration, we saw the party and the parade and all that stuff. Now that it has been a few days, it is Wednesday. We are back in our homes, and we are sort of rested, kind of ish. Still kind of catching up on sleep. If you can tell, I still am kind of sick. But we've now started to kind of process the the grandeur of what we witnessed in person. And I will begin this conversation by just reiterating the first thing I said on our Game 7 recap, which is just an amazing amount of gratitude to have been in the building to witness what is being declared one of the greatest baseball games of all time. You know, you don't want to be prisoner of the moment. You don't want to have the recency bias and just be like, well, yeah, clearly the thing I just watched that I was there for was one of the greatest games of all time. But not just that game, but just the totality of this World Series does seem to be pretty clearly collectively acknowledged as among the greatest ever played. There are numbers to back that up in terms of whether it's, the swings and win probability added, but then also just like, look how many people watched, whether it's across all the Fox networks, across Japan and Canada and all these things. And, the most watched Fox baseball game since 2017, like this really resonated. I think the 18-inning game put this series really into the national spotlight, and then to carry that momentum through Game 7 was astonishing. And I think it is fair to say we did witness a classic in every sense, and that is a pretty amazing thing as we kind of start to wrap our minds around what those 7 games really meant for baseball.
Last couple of days, I've been spending a lot of time around extended family, and a lot of whom are not baseball people, and they have all asked me, how was the World Series? And I have said, good. It was very, very, very good. It was only the best one I have ever seen in my life. Right? And really, that's all that matters, right? Like, is this better than 1960? Who cares? It was better than anything I've seen, and probably, if you're listening to this, as good as anything you've seen. It was legitimately epic. I think that from a neutral's perspective, most people were rooting against the Dodgers. They wanted the proverbial David to beat the proverbial Goliath. The Dodgers, even though they try to frame themselves as the good guys, they have this like pregame hype video that they play at Dodger Stadium where they're like, we're the good guys. And it's like, you're not. You can respect and appreciate what the Dodgers are and also not pretend like they're the heroes here on a neutral scale. But I do think even though the outcome wasn't, like, one of my college teammates was like, the second Kirk hit that ball before they turned it, I turned the TV off. right? This dude is a Cubs fan. Like, he doesn't care. But the series itself was so thoroughly captivating, right? It was interesting even if you didn't know who Tyler Glasnow was or Yoshinobu Yamamoto was. The moments themselves provided theater, and the characters, as you learned about them, only enhanced that dynamic. And so it is good for the sport. Are the Dodgers good for the sport? Tune in after the break. We'll do that. We're going to do that today. I think that is a bigger question. What's not a question is that this series was great for our sport.
Yeah, and I had a fun kind of delusional conversation at 6 a.m. at the Toronto airport as I was waiting to board. Ran into our good pal Ryan Spielborgs, and we were sitting there both sleep deprived. I assume Spilly got more than 0 hours of sleep, but we were sitting there and we did a little draft. We were drafting the 7 World Series games, and it's kind of a fun exercise because there really is something in every game that is just an astonishing thing. I mean, Game 4 is pretty clearly the worst of them, and yet,
but that's the game where Ohtani rolled out after not sleeping and pitched well.
Right, that's the game where Vlad homers off Ohtani. That's the game, you got Bieber in that one. Like, Game 4, far and away the worst one, right? But every other game had something that is just mind-blowing. You have a 9-run inning.
Right.
In Game 1, you have the Yamamoto complete game. You have the 18-inning game. Game 4, okay, and then you have Trey Savage striking out 12 in Game 5. Game 6, which we still have not given enough credit, right, for what that was, for how that ended. Again, sorry, Blue Jays fans. I'm still wrapping my mind around the fact that they lost Game 6 and 7 on double plays. That's like a thing that probably
Whoa.
Right? That's hard to really process. 2 very different double plays, of course. And then
the ball on the wall.
Game 7 where, oh my God. I mean, the ball on the wall. There's the whole 9th inning in Game 6 speaks for itself. And so you just have so much to pick from and so much to process, and all of it contributes to each other, right? Every game allows, impacts the next game.
Yeah.
The fact that we had moments that didn't happen that almost happened, right? Yamamoto almost coming into Game 3 is its own bit of lore that adds to his whole story. Will Klein and Eric Lauer and all these things. So
Barger touching home, just Barger, Addison Barger's foot touching home plate in Game 6 when the ball stuck in the wall. Because what percentage of the crowd at Rogers Center was just like, oh my God, they tied the game? 50, 60, right? Like
more than
that moment felt real.
Sure.
And that's the other thing I think I'll say to Blue Jays fans before we take a break is, like, it's really hard to compartmentalize this and internalize it. But the moments that build up to the defeat are still meaningful, right? Like, the Bo Homer still is one of the greatest things in the history of a franchise. And the ending soils that somewhat, but does not ruin it altogether. I don't think that the Cal Raleigh, Eugenio Suarez home runs in Game 5 are going to be forgotten to the dustbin of Mariners history because of what George Springer did in Game 7, right? Like, it takes the zest out of it, but it doesn't ruin it altogether. Anything else, big picture, Jordan, before we take a break and decide once and for all whether the Dodgers are ruining baseball?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could go player by player on the roster. I guess I'll just keep it simple and just finish on a note on Ohtani that just, like, thinking about him. I do love, and this is part of how this series unfolded as well, that he pretty much emptied the clip in Game 3, right? He gave us 4 for 4 with 4 extra base hits and 5 walks. and didn't really do a whole lot after that. He really didn't. And I love, and this really brings it back to the other big picture takeaway, which is Yamamoto. I love that Ohtani, he gave us maybe the greatest game of all time against the Brewers, right? With the 3 homers and the 10 strikeouts. He gave us this offensive performance in game 3 in an 18-inning game where he just looked completely invincible.
The next day.
He pitched the next day. And I mean, that pitching performance is still incredibly impressive for sure, right? But he was the losing pitcher, indisputably, right? Again, it was an amazing effort, but he was the
loser.
Big loser, Shohei Ohtani. And then by the end, as we saw, they threw him out there in game 7, like he didn't have a lot left. He really didn't have a lot left. No. Yes, he still hit some balls hard by the end of the series, but it was cool that by the end, it was like he has taken us as far as he can. We're going to need Miguel Rojas and Yamamoto on 0 days rest to win this World Series.
It was like when you're at the beach and you're a kid and you're like, let's dig a hole. And you're like, let's just see where it goes. And then you dig the hole so big you hit water and you're like, oh my God, like there is a bottom to the hole. Like that's Ohtani, right? Or like an enormous bag of snacks. Here's an enormous bag of snacks. There's a bottom to the bag. There's an end to all of us, right? And we know that because Ohtani eats and sleeps and poops and whatever. But we very rarely see him tired, right? And we saw him tired. We saw him empty. We saw him. We saw him cooked.
And that's the thing. I just love that we got both. We got the like he is human and also he is not human. Oh my God, look at these performances. Whether he gave us 2 of the greatest performances of all time in the history of the sport in the postseason, and also looked very, very tired because how could he not be? And it would almost just if he somehow carried it all the way through. Not that we don't want to just be like, oh my God, Ohtani wins MVP and ever. It was good that by the end he kind of had to like, all right, I've done enough.
Yeah,
I've done enough. So.
Take a seat.
But he did do it. He did do the thing. He did do the thing. All right, let's.
We're gonna do the thing too.
Yamamoto.
We're gonna take a break.
We'll do more another time. We're gonna take a break. And when we return, Jake, let's answer that question. Are they ruining baseball? We'll be back on Baseball Barbecast.
And welcome back to Baseball Barbecast. There is a topic that we need to talk about. We have joked about it. We have danced around it. It is the question that is dictating the discourse to an extent. And we're going to do our best to kind of wade through it here over the next 15 minutes. What does the Dodgers' back-to-back championships, the budding, burgeoning dynasty, the overwhelming, endless bags of money given to incredible baseball players, what does this all actually mean for the state of baseball? Now, obviously, the backdrop to this question is that the collective bargaining agreement expires at the end of next season. There is an overwhelming assumption within the industry that at least during the offseason, the league will lock out the players during those negotiations. And there is an expectation that there's a possibility that we will miss some number of games. The Dodgers' success, both on the field and, I was about to say in the ballot box, on the field and during free agency, has unleashed a very understandable discussion about whether there should be a salary cap in our sport and if there is a way to instill more equity in our game. Before we begin, I would like to say a couple things. Number one, my opinions on this are not fully formed. I do not have a passionate platform on which to stand or to, champion. I am unsure. I am uncertain. My opinion changes, not drastically. I'm not like burn down the Dodgers one day. I'm not oscillating to extremes, but I do not feel settled. And I think that I hope that that's okay. I know as prognosticators,
I
we're
agree.
supposed to
So
give you the heat.
yeah,
But I don't know how I feel. And I just want to, like, I'm open to more information and having conversations, et cetera, et cetera. That's the first thing. And related to that is, if you, a fan, feel a way, it's probably legitimate how you feel. If you are a Pirates fan and you feel hopeless, that is beyond legitimate. If you are a Dodgers fan and you feel like the other teams should just spend more money, that is also legitimate. And so I think as we move forward, it is important to hold all of these takes and perspectives as fair and incorporate them as we try and make sense of what we're doing. So that is a very long-winded introduction. I will now kick the rock to you, Jordan, to begin.
Yeah, I mean, I think I share a lot of those feelings where you're at as I am trying to process this, and I think that, like, I remember a year ago, people were already trying to have this conversation, and I probably came on here. I know I was having these conversations off the air, and I was like, guys, relax. They have not won again yet. Like a year ago at this time, everyone's like, oh,
Yeah,
they're just going to
yeah.
win the next 5 World Series, and I was like, can we not just assume that, because baseball is really hard? And it's funny because in some ways, of course, that sounds silly as we sit here now talking about their back-to-back titles, and yet there are elements of this season and the series that we just, started to wrap our minds, that we just watched, where it's just like, it wasn't inevitable. Think about the absurd things that had to happen for them to still win. Now, is that an argument in their favor, that it was always inevitable, that they coasted through the regular season and had these level of struggles at the end of the season? And why did they end up winning? Yes, Miguel Rojas had the swing of his life out of the 9-hole. That's amazing and improbable and could happen to any team. They also had an unbelievable collection of very talented pitchers that are making more money than almost every other team can possibly afford. Whether that's Yamamoto plus Snell plus Glasnow plus Ohtani plus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you're kind of stuck between acknowledging that it wasn't that easy. Now, it was for the first part of the National League postseason, as we saw, but then also how close they were to losing and how different this conversation would maybe be.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where you're like, that's silly. Does that end result, because of how close it was in Game 7 of the World Series, actually impact the kind of conversation that we're having? Because the other thing is, if the Blue Jays, and I don't. But the other thing is, if the Blue Jays had one, and we're going to do more Blue Jays conversation later this week, we might be being like, well, yeah, because the Blue Jays also were the 5th highest payroll. They had all this money. They like, both of these teams spent big time to try and get to this position, and they deserve that credit. But also, they might be inspiring some of the same feelings of like, well, we can't compete with the Blue Jays. Forget the Dodgers. That's something that other teams are feeling. I think the way we would talk about the Blue Jays would be more reverential, because they are not viewed as this evil entity the way that the Dodgers are. But just thinking about how
not in America
would or should be is kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny, right, that the Blue Jays, who are this, media conglomerate owned behemoth that is like, they're the David and not the Goliath, is very funny.
Yeah, but they're not David, right? They're not.
I know.
So,
but they're not Goliath. They're like,
the Dodgers are Goliath, but that doesn't mean that there is a David.
Yeah, like for Old Testament people, I'm in my parents' basement. They got all the books right here, actually. Like, who's in between David and Goliath? Like, Samson? Could Samson have taken down Goliath?
I'm not prepared to do.
I know we got rabbis listening. Rabbis,
That's
email
true.
us.
We definitely do.
Email us, baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. But you're right. Like, okay, so let's say IKF gets a better secondary lead and he's safe at home, which he should have. I'll stand by that. You're so sick of that one, but I'm not. I'm still texting with people about it, dude.
Yeah, no, I know. It's fine.
But like, does that
he's safe.
Significantly,
Blue Jays win.
Like, Blue Jays win. He's safe. Blue Jays win. Okay, no dynasty. Everything's fine. Like, that also feels empty to me. But at the same time, that the Dodgers won changes the public perception, and the public perception is relevant to a point. So what should be done? I don't know. I am still hesitant about the concept of a salary cap. I don't like the idea. I think that artificially capping what players or people can make is problematic and antithetical to the country we live in a way. Like, if we're going to do capitalism, like, do it. However, I think that the hopelessness that other fan bases feel is a problem. I think that the enormous gap between what the Dodgers are spending and what the Pirates are spending is a problem. Now, what the Dodgers can spend and what the Pirates can spend, right? The can and the R is different, and you need to find a way to push the floor up is more important than pushing the top down, in my opinion. How do you get there? I don't know. This is where we're diving into the economics of baseball. But I just keep going back to the idea that the frustration that other fan bases feel is legitimate, but that frustration, again, I'm not telling people to do, should be directed more towards their own team's lack of action than at the Dodgers' overwhelming course of action. The way that the Dodgers are operating is reasonable and rational within the framework that exists, right? So again, I'm talking in circles. Does then that mean we need to change the framework that exists? I guess maybe so.
Yeah, and this is where I also go back to the point I made when we referenced what Jeff Passan wrote about Dodgers versus Brewers, where it was like, this is really going to show us because you have the big market versus the small market. And I made that point at the time. I was like, well, let's see what happens next year. And I'll say that again, because
the year is 2033. The Dodgers have won 12 in a row, and Jordan Shusterman hops on Baseball Barbacast AI earbud Google Glass and says, let's see what happens next year. Will they win it again?
I understand why you're making that joke. I'm saying that more in the context of just like what the discourse is when literally we are heading into the lockout. So yes. My point about it at that point was not the same one that I was making last year, where it was like, let's see if they actually win again. It's more about what are we talking about in the literal weeks leading up to this conversation, because public perception is a huge part of it. And this is, I think, my last point about, as we do think about big picture, is this going to impact, labor negotiations and everything, which is that it's also some of the things we were talking about before, regardless of how it impacts labor and the economics, which is just that, like, baseball's doing pretty well. And is how much do the owners and the players and all this want to fight over these things for reasons good or bad on both sides, and get in the way of a sport that clearly has a lot of positive momentum? That is the real existential question that I think we are going to be talking about.
But that has less to do with the Dodgers, in my opinion. Specifically,
yes and no.
Specifically, the Dodgers. Like, yeah.
Well, I think it's relevant because I think, and we've seen this in other sports, like, is it good to have a team that everyone at the top that everyone is gunning for? Is that something that increases television ratings, increases attendance, increases, because that is now part of the Dodgers story.
So is the problem that there is a dynasty, or is the problem with how the dynasty was built, exists, operates, is maintained? Right? Because if you want to call the Patriots or the Chiefs a dynasty, or the Bulls, right? The Bulls, obviously a dynasty. Like, you have these teams that build these empires of sport. Is that the problem? Right? In and of itself. Or not? Like, if, I'm just trying to think of an example, right? Let's say the Royals beat the Giants in 14 and win it again in 15, and we're talking about or like the Giants from 10 to 14, right? Like, is that the problem, or is the problem that it is this big market team with endless bags of money, right? That is winning for that reason and not just because they're like skilled at the hard parts, you know? With again, the Dodgers obviously are good at all of it. And I think one thing actually I would like to hop in here and say is the Dodgers' financial might helps them with player development. Like I don't want to just pretend that they're signing Tyler Glass now for like 120 million and then they have like, you know, a bunch of dudes they found on the street who are like middle school assistant coaches that are running their hitting development program. Like, no, they're spending gobs of money on the best coaches they can find and the best tech, and right, like that money matters too. And so I think that that is also important to recognize for this conversation. And then I guess the last thing that's just sticking in my craw, and none of this is really related, is how much does the public perception actually matter at the negotiating table? Right? I remember having a conversation with someone, I can't remember, like I'm not just saying, I cannot remember whether it was the league or the union, someone who works there, about how fans are not in the room and how at a certain point, the people negotiating don't care about the fans and what they think and what they have to say, because it doesn't matter when you're doing the arguing. And I think that that is true to a point. However, it is relevant as it pertains to the Dodgers because I feel like it will empower 25 owners and Rob Manfred and Dan Halem, who does a lot of the negotiating, and Morgan Sword and all these people at the league. It will empower them more to push for a cap because more people who care and follow the game want it than they did, 5 years ago. And I think that that is something that the union is working against as they enter negotiations next year, is that the public perception has shifted. I think more than any time in the game's union labor history, the public perception was on the side of the Players Association during the last negotiations, right? And I think part of that is just the way that the media talks about the sport and the way that fans are more educated and the way that like a lot of the owners got kind of cartoonish in the way that they were speaking. And it was very easy. And Rob Manfred calling it a piece of metal, like all these things, I think made it easier for the Players Association to frame the debate in a way that kind of benefited them. I don't think that that is as easy, as simple, and as like straightforward for them this go around because of how many people want a cap and how simple, like the idea of a cap feels and smells simple as a solution. And I think that the union is going to be up against that. And I do think that that is connected to the Dodgers winning. I think that if the Jays if Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is safe at home, I think that it is slightly easier, as silly as that sounds, for the Players Association to argue against the cap. And that butterfly wing flapping series of events is stupid and silly and, trivial and bizarre, but I do think that it is relevant to a point. If you cannot tell, I am parsing through this live on the air. As I said at the outset, my ideas and opinions and perspective is not fully formed. Neither are my arguments. And I hope that that's okay, because this is ugly and complicated and annoying to think about. It is not what we want to be talking about on this podcast. Because we like baseball, we like the sport, and that is why we do this, why we love doing it. But as things become relevant, we will certainly talk about them on this show.
Yes, I agree with all of that. And also, yeah, you can tell we're still in the early stages, and we're going to keep talking about this for better or for worse over the next year. And also over the rest of this offseason. I maintain that what happens next postseason will make a difference in kind of what we're talking about, because if the Dodgers flame out in the first round, everyone might just be like, what's the big deal? And if they win again, it's all this times 100. But also this offseason will make a difference too, because the last thing I'll say about the Dodgers before we take a break and go around the league and talk about some other teams is that this roster right now is not perfect, and it is getting older, and their outfield kind of stinks, and their bullpen, which they clearly did not use at all to win the World Series, but you have to get through the regular season, is not in a good place. They did not spend their money very well last year, if we're being honest, right? I mean, Snell, yes, that worked out, but Conforto was a disaster. Tanner Scott was a disaster. Kirby Yates was a disaster, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which means they're going to go try and spend a bunch more money this winter again, too. And how that influences this conversation will certainly be interesting. And I'm sure we will have versions of this discourse throughout the winter as well. But for now, we're going to take a break. And when we return, we're going to talk about some other stuff going on around the league. We'll be right back on Baseball Barbacast.
And welcome back to Baseball Barbacast. On the rest of this show, I don't know if we'll say the word Dodgers. Let's go around the league. Let's begin with the Gold Gloves, which are silly. They are silly for two main reasons in my mind. One is that it is so hard to define who is good at defense. Our metrics have never been better, and yet the eye test still carries so much weight and in terms of the way fans think about defense and in the way that defense is evaluated by who votes for these. I actually don't even know who votes for these now that I think about it. If you could figure that out, Jordan, that'd be great. The other reason Gold Gloves are hard for me to get riled up about is that the announcement of the Gold Gloves always seems to come at the worst time. When the Gold Gloves decided to announce themselves on the night of the 2020 presidential election, that was the moment for me where I was like, you've lost me. Like, if you care so little about making this a big deal that you're going to do this while like the whole country is locked into like frickin' Maricopa County or whatever, like I can't match the energy. And that was similar this year of doing it the evening after Game 7, literally on Sunday night. I was like, I can't. But I'm very happy for all these people who are good at defense.
Yeah, I think the point you kind of glossed over there is way more important, which is that everyone gets really mad about it without even really understanding how it gets voted on. And that's because that changes like seemingly often in terms of there's managers that vote on it, but then there's sometimes it's coaching staffs. And then there's like a objective component of like, okay, we're going by defensive runs saved and this stuff. And it's like, okay, all of this, none of this is making it easier to get interested. But also, the key problem is that there's just more players that are absolutely deserving than can actually win. And so you have a situation where, and the most clear example is like, you talk to people around teams, they can't even believe that their player won't win. Like it's very different than MVP
You're
and
right.
Cy Young and like those awards where it's like,
it's more accessible.
There's an understanding where it's like, okay, this is very hard to win. It's going to be close. With Gold Gloves, every team thinks like, what do you like? I'll say this. Like being around the Mariners with the CS, they couldn't fathom that Julio would not win. And I agree. I think Julio's deserving, but he didn't win. And I wasn't surprised because no Gold Glove outcome really surprises me anymore because it's hard to figure out how it gets voted on. And there's more than one deserving player. And so I just can't get worked up about it. Of course you wish your favorite player. But
Star Rafael is amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, he played way fewer innings than Julio, but whatever. I am done trying to pretend like I know how this is going to end up. Are there little bits and pieces that I find cool, like Ian Happ and Stephen Kwan both winning 4 in a row in left field? I love that. I think that's
awesome.
I love that we have like a left field dynasty going on, and you have these streaks that do end up building up to something that you end up kind of caring about, but. Otherwise, I'm kind of done trying to figure this out, and I do think fans like listen. It doesn't make them any less. We all like our favorite players to be rewarded, but it's just not how this works anymore. It's just too kind of random and opaque. So anyway, let's go.
The one thing worth pointing out: PCA won. PCA is gonna win a lot. And I think it is just cool to recognize that here we are, PCA has number one. Like he has his first one.
Right. And how many will he win is the question, because as we know, he is one of the great defenders in center field that we have seen in quite some time. He is essentially breaking the scale. And honestly, if Denzel Clark starts playing every day in center field for the A's, I imagine he will be coming for that award annually as well, based on those numbers. But yes, like the vote, it's some of it's from the managers, from the coaches, but then it's also based on a sabermetric component with Saber. But again, that is not just one number. So all of which is to say, it's fun to celebrate players winning awards. This is one that is difficult to fully wrap our arms around. Okay, now let's get to some real news that we have real opinions about.
Well, actually, wait, quickly. Yeah. I appreciate that they did it this way, but in a way, I wish it was just like that boy nice, the Gold Gloves. Like, I wish he was just like, that guy looked the best. He was cool as hell.
Yeah.
And he was really good out there.
Some of the ones that win, it feels that way, but I don't know.
I don't know. I just
hard to.
Whatever. Okay, enough Gold Gloves. You're right. Sorry. Let's talk options. We got options. Everyone really has options. Everyone has choices. God gave us free will. And that is also the case with the Chicago Cubs and Shota Imanaga, who is suddenly, out of nowhere, a free agent. This is complicated. Shota Imanaga, the Japanese lefty who was unbelievable as a rookie in 2024, kind of took a half step back in 2025, got clonked around in the playoffs against the Brewers. I'm going to do my best to explain this. The Cubs had 3 years and $57 million left on his deal that they had an option to activate. They declined to do that. Imanaga then had a 1 year, $15 million player option that he could then activate. He declined to do that as well. And he is now as free of an agent as Jake Mintz and Jordan Shusterman are. This is certainly surprising.
Yeah. I mean, this one, and again, this contract that Imanaga signed at the time was like, oh, there's some weird contingencies in here. And at the time when it was like a 4 year, $53 million guarantee, that is, the guarantee basically means the player has the options to basically guarantee himself the money if he wants it. But based on the situation, he's turning down the 15 that he would have. Cubs turning down 357. This is, you say a half step back. Like, I dug into this because, I added him to our top 50 free agent rankings, and it's just a really weird profile. This is a guy whose whip actually got better in his second season, but the strikeouts went way down, and the home runs are just basically as bad as it gets, which was pretty much the worry when he came over, that he's just so fly ball prone. Second highest home run per 9 in baseball this year. And I think that for a guy that is not going to suddenly start throwing a lot harder, I think that the Cubs, it's surprising because of the state of the Cubs rotation more than Imanaga being worth 357. And we're going to find out what he's worth on the open market now, which is very compelling. But it's kind of a weird and honestly just kind of sad, disappointing ending to his tenure there. And maybe they rework something and he ends up staying there. But like, he really became a fan favorite. And I know it didn't end great with the postseason there, but he was awesome. What a find. And I know more so last year than this year, but for the way we were talking about this guy and last year, again, it's funny now because it was like, oh man, Imanaga at this cost compared to Yamamoto, what a steal. We know now clearly there's a big difference between those two pitchers, but regardless of the comparison, like what a fun pitcher, what a fun personality who really seemed to love being a Cub. And so just an interesting guy to kind of add to the free agent pool. I ended up ranking him 21st, not in too high, because I do think that he's more of a guy that's going to be valuable in the regular season than the postseason. But I still think this is a pitcher that a lot of teams would want to have.
Finished 5th in Cy Young last year. 5th in Cy Young, 4th in Rookie of the Year is very funny, actually, now that I'm looking at those two things next to each other. So that's Imanaga. He's on the open market. He hops into our top 50. Two guys hopping out of our top 50 by opting in to their contracts. We'll start with the simpler one, I think, which is Jack Flaherty opts into $20 million for 2026 to stay with the Detroit Tigers. Flaherty just wasn't that good this year, and it's hard to get paid $20 million.
I agree, but most people thought he was going to opt out again because he did stay healthy. He struck out a lot of guys. To me, this is as much a reflection of happy in Detroit. 20 million is a lot for 1 year, and I agree. I'm not sure he would have gotten 20 million AAV, but I think he's young enough that he absolutely could have gotten multiple years. That said, he's probably telling himself that, and then he's remembering what happened last year, where he had one of the longest free agencies and a free agency where really very few teams seem to show interest. And I'm not surprised that Jack Flaherty is like, I don't really want to do that again. I can just take $20 million, stay in Detroit where I am happy to be, and try to pitch better and do it again next year when I actually have to. This one, I'm surprised because I do believe that his value would be higher than this in terms of guaranteeing. But based on his experience last year, I'm not surprised that he was like, I'm not dealing with that again. At least for now.
The other one that was much more shocking was Shane Bieber opting in to $16 million for 2026 to stay with the Toronto Blue Jays. So Bieber signed a 2-year deal with a opt-out with the Guardians last winter. The overwhelming expectation was that Bieber was going to use the first year to most of the first season to rehab, come back, pitch well in the second half, and then parlay that into a new free agent deal. That all happened, except he didn't opt out. What is the breakdown of the money here? I know he had $16 million left, but he had a $4 million buyout. Is that correct?
Yeah, which essentially means, how you add it up and say, what is he really worth? Or what is this contract really worth? What is he turning down if he was going to have $4 million, if he was going to opt out to begin with? This is stunning. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, you compare it to Flaherty. I think people were even more optimistic about people betting big on Bieber moving forward as he moves farther away from surgery, whether with Flaherty, while he has clearly demonstrated more health and more durability, whatever, you kind of can imagine there's more teams that are just like, well, we know what Jack Flaherty is. Like, we like it or we don't. And clearly last year, it seemed like not a lot of teams were that interested. With Bieber, the sense was, while it was not a perfect return from Tommy John, and, there's still parts where you're not totally sure what you're going to be getting moving forward, it was way easier to imagine teams getting excited about what it could become moving forward because of what he was, before surgery. And instead, he decides to stay on a contract that, in a very simple sense, let's say he turns this down. I guess he couldn't get the qualifying offer because he was traded for, which is an interesting way to think about it. But would he, even from just thinking about it from a value standpoint, if he was able to get a qualifying offer, he would have easily getting a QO, right? And so I know that's not relevant because of the context, but this tells me a lot about, obviously, listen, I was in that clubhouse after Game 7. Shane Bieber was one of the most emotionally impacted by far. Of course, he gives up the game-winning home run to Will Smith, but it's not on Shane Bieber. The fact that he was even in that game says a lot more about how that game unfolded than Shane Bieber, the pitcher. And it's not like him allowing that home run is going to impact him as a free agent. But he was very open about how incredible his experience with Toronto was. This is also someone who just had his first child, in March. I mean, it's a shocking thing to turn down, to presumably pass up the opportunity to cash in substantially more. From a life standpoint, it's not that surprising that he would want to stay with Toronto. And we should also say it's very possible that they're just going to rework and try and, because there's a deadline, right? He had to decide on the option this week. I think Thursday is the deadline. And so maybe from a negotiating and just good faith standpoint, he's telling Toronto, I'm going to opt in. Maybe they work something out. Now, Toronto doesn't have to, because they've been given this gift. They can just be like, look, dude, we love you, but we're just going to take this. You wanted to opt in? Great. You're going to be in at 16 million and we're just going to keep you for next year at an incredible bargain, arguably. And we'll move forward from there. or they'll work out something more long term based on the affection that they have from both sides. But it is
But
it is a pretty stunning decision from a strictly
I think the
financial
organization, though, yeah, the organization deserves a lot of credit for this. You hear teams talk about, oh, we want to be a destination, we want to be good to our players, we want to have a good environment. And then usually when it all comes down to it, the guys understandably take the money. This is the opposite in that way. And I think that the Blue Jays, both the facilities and the way that the families are treated and the whole setup is worth something to Bieber. And his experience was so meaningful enough that he's decided to run it back. Maybe he wants to, be around that group again. And I think that's cool. It's cool that this happens sometimes. So congratulations to him. Congratulations to the Blue Jays and to Blue Jays fans who get to watch Shane Bieber for another season. Two more quick option things. Trevor Story, who had a fantastic bounce back season with the Red Sox, he is opting in to $255 left on his deal. That's what we expected. We did not put him on our free agent ranking as a result because we were pretty sure he was going to do that. And then the White Sox exercised a $20 million club option on Luis Robert Jr. That was also the overwhelming expectation. No big surprise there. The Royals extended Salvador Perez. He had a $13.5 million team option. Instead, they went ahead and gave him 2 years, $25 million for age 36 and 37. That is compelling. The 225, just in how that might impact JT Realmuto's market. I think that's something that we can talk about next year. Similar ages for catchers who are, gracefully declining into their late 30s. Other news, Yu Darvish out for all of 2026 following internal brace surgery in his elbow. This is a big deal because it will certainly impact the way that the Padres conduct their offseason, both in terms of the free agent market, both in terms of trades, and then in terms of, do they tell some of their relievers to build up into starters, whether that's Mason Miller, Adrian Morejon. I would not be shocked if some of the people that contributed to the Padres' amazing bullpen this year are starting games for them next year, because right now their rotation is Nick Pivetta, Joe Musgrove, who missed all of 2025, Randy Vasquez, the greatest pitcher in the history of the sport, our dear Bay, JP Sears, knuckleball boy Matt Waldron. That is not a contender's rotation, so they will need to do something. And then the last bit of news that we'll talk about before we get out of here is just manager carousel. October has prevented us from really digging our teeth into this. We got news on Monday evening that Walter Weiss, Heisenberg, will be the new manager in Atlanta. Walt Weiss was the bench coach under Brian Snitker since 2018. Was the skipper for the Rockies from 13 to 16, longtime big leaguer, one-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year way back in 1989, I believe. His hiring just represents some continuity for the Braves, who are kind of doubling down on the current system and the roster and all of it. We'll dig our teeth into that more next week, but we should just note that there are 2 teams left without jobs filled. That is the San Diego Padres, and that is the Colorado Rockies. We expect the Padres job to be announced at some point this week before the GM meetings start next week. The Rockies is much more of a mess. It is a cluster and a half.
Will the Rockies have a GM at the GM meetings is a legitimate question being asked at this point, despite over a month of trying to figure this out. So we will see if we will continue to dunk on the Rockies all offseason long. The Padres job is certainly quite interesting. But for now, we say goodbye. Thank you to Andrew Hartz, Ingrid Rosas, as always, for producing this episode of Baseball Barbecast at a much more normal hour. We're just chilling here at 10:30 a.m. East Coast time. It's just like this is all normal. No more 4 a.m. recordings. What a grind it was this postseason. But as we said at the end of our Game 7 recap, we appreciate all the support on our podcast all postseason long. It meant a lot to see that people were listening, people were watching, people were enjoying the show. We're going to keep that momentum going into the offseason. We will be back on Friday, going 2 times a week. Maybe we'll work in a third show here and there, depending on news. We'll be back on Friday with some more Blue Jays chatter, as well as some other offseason check-ins. But until then, you can email us, baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Hearts. Thank you, Ingrid. We'll talk to you all very soon. Bye-bye.